Are you looking to get a jazz bass, but you don't know which one to pick up? What if I was to tell you that this Sire Marcus Miller V7 bass can give you all the tones you need that rival boutique jazz basses at a fraction of the cost? This bass has modern electronics, vintage soul, and enough tonal range to cover everything from Jaco style growl to Marcus Miller slap sparkle. You can even get some hard rock that might even rival a P-bass. Hang around to the end and we'll see if we can dial in some pro level tones for jazz, funk, and soul. Hey, I'm Twisty, and I've been looking around for a jazz style bass for on and off for a while now. And last week I was asked to do some jazz improv stuff, and I really just needed that jazz sound, which I couldn't get out of my P basses. Well, I could get close, but it just wasn't the same. And it was a good excuse to buy a new bass. So I went into the market. The Fender Jazz Bass has been the foundation for so many iconic bass tones. Next to the P bass, it's probably the most iconic bass you'll find in the industry. Leo Fender introduced the jazz bass in 1960 as an accompaniment and more sophisticated instrument to that of the P bass previously released. It featured a new offset body design, a narrower neck for faster playability, and the significant tonal change came with the two single coil pickups which were independently volume controlled, allowing basses to blend sounds that were previously unavailable in the P bass. This provided bassists the unprecedented tonal versatility when they're in the studio looking for different sounds. Using the two volume controls, bassists were able to blend in a mix of the neck pickup and the bridge pickup, moving from a nice warm P bassy sound to a unique nasally dual pickup sound and all the way to the bridge pickup for that gritty growl. This versatility, plus its comfortable feel, soon made this an industry standard instrument, and the jazz bass has since become one of the most important influences in modern bass design. But here's the catch. Most bass players can't afford a high-end jazz bass. You either buy vintage warmth, a Fender jazz bass, or modern flexibility, something with an active pickup in it, but rarely both. This is where the Sire Marcus Miller came in. Around 2015, Marcus Miller teamed up with a small Korean company and were looking to build a bass that any player can afford, but that still feels and sounds like a professional instrument. And in my opinion, after playing this for about a week now, I think they've absolutely nailed it. With entry-level passive pickup versions in the V3 and V5s, marketed to that traditional jazz bass sound at a very affordable price. The V7 model is modeled after Marcus's own jazz bass with a heritage-free active EQ designed to his specification. And the V7 is the flagship model of that V series. Not too expensive, not too cheap, active and passive modes. The V7 comes in two different timbre types. There's ash or an older body. It has a rolled edge neck, has active passive electronics, and a studio grade preamp that can go from old school Motown to modern fusion, all within the one bass. So let's dig into what makes this bass work so well and why it's become a bit of a revolution for working bass players. Most bass players hit a wall between good tone and great tone. Maybe your passive jazz sounds fine at home, but it gets lost when you're playing live. Or your active bass has all the knobs, but none of the vibe. We've all been there. Too muddy, too bright, too clinical, too much not me. That's the frustration that Marcus Miller and Sire wanted to fix. They wanted to make a bass that sounded right straight out of the box. in any style without needing to spend $3,000. So the Sire V7 is designed as a system. There's a vintage build. So when you pick it up, it feels and looks like a Fender jazz bass in the 60s style. The pickups are where you want them. The neck feels smooth. It has modern electronics with a sweepable mid-range, which we'll come back to why that's so important shortly. And player comfort. It has cutaway at the back. It has cutaway at the front. It's got that jazz feel. The neck is smooth. The rolled edges make it feel like it's been worn in already. So let's unpack what makes this design so clever. Now, before we get into more about this bass, I just want to let you know that this is not a sponsored video. Sire, Marcus Miller, nobody has actually paid me to talk about this bass. I purchased this bass with my wife's money, don't tell her, after doing some research and playing a few different brands. So I've picked this bass based on my liking, not because someone's paying me to do that. So let's look at the body first. The V7 comes in two timber flavors. There's Swamp Ash, which gives you a bright, snappy sound, great for slap and funk, and an Alder, which is warmer and rounder for soul and classic rock tones. Now, this is the Ash reissue model, and it is a Swamp Ash body. So it's going to give me a bright, snappier feel for that funk and slap, which I don't do very well, but it gets me out of my rock roots. So the Ash reissue is Swamp Ash. The V7 Relic and the V7 Alder both have Alder bodies. The V7s come with either a maple, like on this reissue, and is also available on the vintage Alder, or a rosewood fingerboard, which is on the V7 Alder model. So depending on which vibe you want, they all feel the same, but the sound and the tone will be slightly different based on the fret material you use and the body timber that you've selected. The edges are rolled smooth. Sire calls this an edgeless design. They've tried to make it feel like the bass has been played for 30 years and it's already worn in. And certainly when I picked this up and started playing it, it certainly felt comfortable and already pre-worn in. So it might be marketing, but it actually feels really comfortable. Very smooth. The neck itself is a classic C-shape profile, and it just melts into your hand as you play. If you've ever felt a chunky jazz bass that fights back when you're trying to play, well, this one isn't. This one is a joy to play. It's like it's cheering you on, wanting you to play better. I personally like the P-bass and the big fat baseball size of the neck on a P-bass, like I get with my Attitude basses. But having picked this one up, it feels really comfortable, and it was really easy to slot in to be able to play nicely. Which is the bit that I was actually really worried about when I was looking for a jazz bass, and why I've put off buying a jazz bass for so long. Let's have a look at the electronics of the Heritage 3 preamp. When you first pick it up, like I did, it's very confusing, right? There's knobs everywhere, right? But once you go through them and you get used to them, it's actually not that hard. It's very intuitive. The first control we have is the volume and tone control. So the top part of it is the volume, and then down the bottom is a classic tone control. This in passive mode, there's a passive active switch at the bottom. In passive mode, with the switch pointing all the way to the neck, I can put the volume on and I can roll back some of the tone to get that classic jazz sound. The next one is my pickup selector. So in the middle, there's a notch. In the middle, I've got both pickups on. So with both pickups on and the tone rolled back a bit, now if I push that to the all the way forward, so I'm now using just the front pickup. Again, I've got that rolled off slightly to get rid of some of the tops. I can roll it all the way back to the bridge. And get a bit of that sort of Jacko-y style. Harmonics just pop out, and this is in passive mode. And then of course you've got the ability to blend anywhere between those full-on neck, full-on bridge, and anywhere to the both are on 100%. So lots of flexibility just in passive mode. If we move on to the next three, I've got a bass tone. It's notched in the middle and it's set at around about 20 Hertz. So it's sweeping around 20 Hertz from a volume perspective. So I can increase the volume at 20 Hertz or I can decrease the gain, at 20 Hertz. And again, notched for the middle. The end one is a treble control and it is set at 10 kilohertz. Again, it's notched for the middle, which means it's basically at zero. Zero gain. If I increase the gain, I'm increasing the 10 kilohertz. And if I decrease it, I'm decreasing or cutting out some of the 10 kilohertz. Again, if I set them to flat or at the notch, then they're effectively off and it's like just giving it a bit of head boost to or headroom to my playing. So I put into active mode, everything flat. At flat. Now the magic button happens in the middle. So I have a sweepable, I have a gain control for the mid-range and then I have a sweepable mid-range. And the mid-range goes from, let me just look, 80 Hertz up to 2 kilohertz. So if I'm down all the way to the right, I'm sweeping at around 80 Hertz or volume gaining and reducing. And if I sweep it all the way to the top, it's at around about that 2 kilohertz mark. At the neutral position or the zero position, that's at around about 600 Hertz. So I can now play around with between a little bit of a bump up on the sweep. It gets me to say 500. So I can sweep between sort of 400 and 700 Hertz quite easily and control that depending on the room that I'm in and the style that I'm going to play with. So having that sweepable mid-range is really cool and flexible. So in passive mode, it's all just jazz bass. And when I put into active, I now get either a flat EQ, which just gives me lots of headroom, or I can do a bit of a Marcus Miller type approach. I can bump up the bass a little bit, bump up the treble a little bit, and I can drop back some of the mids and I'll get this sort of sound. So the advantage of this active EQ is I basically get a music studio on the bass. Now what I'm playing through is very flat. I've taken it, I'm using my Line 6 Helix. I've set up a Ampeg SV4 Pro. I've set everything flat and I've put a 4x10 cabinet on the back of it. The only effect I have on it at the moment is a compressor at the beginning, which I always put on. So what you're hearing is a very flat amp and cab with just the bass. So let's talk about the pickups. The pickups are Marcus Super J Revolution single coils, co-developed with Marcus Miller and Sire. They're built to reproduce a 70s jazz growl with clear highs, tight lows, and punchy mids. On this V7 Ash reissue, it's got 60s jazz pickup spacing, which gives a warmer, rounder sound. On the vintage models or the non-reissue models, the older bodied models, they have the bridge is moved back to a 70s spacing. So that gives you that signature Marcus snap and growl. So he has that 70s pickup placing, and that gives him that style. That little half shift just changes the sound, especially for slap or fusion. Now, if you've got ears like mine, you might not notice the difference, but playing them in the store, I certainly heard the difference. The build quality and value of this bass is outstanding. It's rare the Sire really flipped the industry. You're getting premium wood, you're getting pro preamp, and you're getting rolled fretboard edges, you're getting solid hardware, all for under $1,000. The bass easily compares to basses that are twice and even 3 times the price, and for good reason. Doing this video at the end of 2025, having a look at Sweetwater's pricing, the Fender American Ultra 2 Jazz, which is basically the same configuration, active, passive, sweepable, EQ, etc., was selling for $2,419 US. Now, if I compare that to this bass, which sells for $649 US. So a significant price difference for a really great quality, great tonal bass machine. The V7 comes with a soft case, but it's actually not quite a soft case. It's got rigid sides to it. And so it was very well packed, and I'd be very comfortable taking that with me anywhere I'm traveling. Maybe not on an airplane, but pretty well anywhere else. Out of the box, it was set up and it was playable. All I had to do was tune it, and to me, it's quite comfortably set. One of the things I do like about it is that it is also got a string through option. Now, coming out of the box, it's not set up for string through. So when I go to change these strings, I will do that because I like the extra body sound that having string through does. So I've got for $650 US, I've got a solid timbre, really playable fast neck, a high quality EQ, active passive mode, a comfortable bass with string through options. Now, you don't get most of that on those Fender models. Now, I went with the reissue version rather than the older, not because of the timbre, but I went through it because I like the look. I really like this poplar pearl finish over the ash. The maple fretboard, and all 3 of the models I played, all played exactly, or felt exactly the same. The only difference, as I said, was one's painted, this one has a nice feature, and I really like the maple fretboard. So that's why I picked this model over the other 2, but playing them without plugging them in, they all felt amazing. Okay, so let's make this a bit real. Here's how it sounds in 3 different real world type situations. Now, I'm not going to change the amp at all. I said I'm using an Ampeg SVT4 Pro model with a 4x10 cabinet out of the Helix, and it's all set to flat. I haven't got the ultra high on, I haven't got the ultra low on, there's no bright, and I have left the EQ off. So it's just going to be what tone controls I can get out of this particular bass. Early warning, I am not a jazz player, so be warned. But if I look at a jazz fusion setting, then I'm going to set the bass into active mode. I'm going to set the neck pickup at around 40%. So I'm going to have more split towards the rear pickup. So that's at about halfway. I'm going to set the bass up around about 6 decibels. So I'm just going to turn that up a little notch. I'm also going to set the treble slightly higher than normal, about 4 decibels, give or take. And I'm going to set the mids at about 700 hertz. So halfway is 600. So I'm just going to give it a little turn. It's about 700. And I'm just going to notch that up again slightly. My volume's up and I've got the tone control rolled back slightly. So this should give that sort of Jucko meets Marcus type sound. Can you hear that growly mids articulate attack? Now if I look more at that funk slap tone, I'm going to leave it with the active on, but I'm going to hit the pickup so they're split 50-50. But I'm going to bump up the bass about 15 dB. I'm going to take some of the mids out, so around the 600, so put that back to the middle. I'm going to drop that and punch some of the, or cut out some of the mids. And I'm going to increase the treble to match roughly what the bass is. So I'm doing is I'm creating a smiley EQ, which has bottom, top, and cut the mids out. This is not so good for rock, but it's allegedly great for that slap sound. By scooping the mids, you get some tight lows, glassy highs, and that pop should just come through that band mix. So if you're doing a lot of that slappy stuff that I just can't do, doesn't matter how many times I do Scott's bass lessons, slap lessons, which I do recommend everybody does, I just don't practice it, so bad me, sorry Scott. You can even lower the mids a bit more if you want that glossy studio funk tone. So play around with that mid range to try and get everything to pop out. That's what you're trying to get with this style of playing, that the low end with the pops really popping out. And with the EQ, with the headroom in that, it's really hard to distort that. Now, if you're looking for some soul, R&B, maybe a bit of pop type style, bit more like a P bass, if you put that into passive mode and you set the neck pick up to 100%, you roll off a little bit of the tone, you should get that funk sound. If you add some flat wounds to that sound, you get that pure Jameson nostalgic sound out of a jazz. Well, I'm sorry if I've offended any jazz or fusion players, but I don't think the Sire V7 isn't great because it's cheap. I think it's great because it delivers pro-level tone, feel, and flexibility at a price I could afford, well, my wife could afford, that makes that tone really accessible. With this bass, the ability to go with active, passive, blending the pickups, etc. You can pretty well walk into any session or gig and sound like you belong there. As I mentioned before, the equivalent Fender jazz bass version, the Ultra 2, which has the same type of configuration, active, passive, etc., is nearly 3 times the price of this guitar, which is ridiculous. So Marcus Miller didn't just lend his name to the bass, he's also helped design the bass that solves the real problems we face as players. We need tone control without overcomplication. As I said, this looks a bit complicated when you start, but once you start playing with it, it's actually pretty simple. I need consistency from studio to stage, and I want a bass that inspires me every time I plug it in. I've been playing this for about a week now and I'm really digging it. Some of the different tones I'm getting out of that is inspiring me to play different styles of music. So if you're hunting for one bass that can pretty well do everything in that jazz format, it'll get you that Geddy Lee sound, you can go to the Jacko sound, you can get the Marcus thump, then I would highly recommend these Sire V7 models. They are, to my value brain, absolutely outstanding for the money. Let me know in the comments below if you've got a jazz bass, if you've got a Marcus Miller, what you think and how you set yours up to play. And if you haven't seen it yet, check out this video. Catch ya.